Hello, YouTube. Today is June 18th, 2021, and today they've just released Factorio Friday Facts number 366. It's been a long time since we've heard from them. I think it's almost 4 months now. Yeah, the last one was February 5th, and it's a message directly from Coverex. Hopefully it'll be about the future of Factorio. I haven't read any of it, so I'm coming at this fresh. Thank you very much for watching this, and well, let's get to it. All right, Factorio Friday Facts number 366. You go ahead and go. The only way to go fast is to go well. Posted by Coverex himself. That's pretty great. I don't know who that person is on the icon. Discovery of Uncle Bob and his really nice explanation. Oh, okay. I do not know Uncle Bob. All right. I guess that's my answer. I read ahead. All right. We obviously have a lot to talk about when it comes to game changes, and we recently did or plan to, but we don't want to share any of it yet. Oh, man. Yet there's currently a topic relevant to us. We can share it without revealing any specific changes to the game. Today's post will be quite technical and related to programming. Well, so if you just came for game news, you can skip this one. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Uncle Bob says, now that there are only developers here. Oh, great. I can share my discovery of Uncle Bob and his really nice explanation of some fundamental principles related to programming project and more. If you have 8.5 free hours on your hands, propose you watch it. Preferences later on. My general thought was to maintain the quality of the code became quite high. I may summarize some of this. Guerrillas be good work methodology. But we were the victims of selective blindness in many places. It's interesting, actually, how some pieces of code were just good from the start and stayed pretty good. All the years, even when it was expanded a lot, and some of the code has just deteriorated heavily. And the answer is explained with a metaphor of a wax foundation. Hex code, right? My grandfather was a very enthusiastic beekeeper. My childhood was spent in the garden. You had to be careful where you step, where you sit down, where you could never leave anything sweet just laying around because you would find a big pile of bees on it quite soon. I'd help him and learn about the bees from time to time. Honestly hated because I'd never have any bees of my own, but he was right about one thing. Everything you learn will be useful to you one way or the other. Oh. One of the jobs you do around bees is that when honey is taken away from the bees, you put a wax foundation in the hive. It looks like this. Right. That I kind of knew. I think that helps them make some more, right? Primary function is that the bees build their tiles evenly and quite fast. It's just natural to follow the optimized structure that's already there. This is exactly what happens with code. It has a good expandable design from the start. On the other hand, there is code that has a lazy original design, or it was never expected to grow so much in complexity. Each of the changes were just a small addition to the mess. Eventually we got used to the idea this part of the code is just hell, and then and that small change is annoying. It implies that we don't like this part of the code. I spend as little time as possible working with it, right? And thus the problem is so slowly spiraling out of control. Well, maybe it's spiraling out of building, right? I took the Uncle Bob glasses and started looking around. I quickly identified several problematic places like this. It's not a coincidence. These were places eating away just one of a large amount of dev time, only because making changes is hard because they're full of regression bugs. Yep, and generally were a never-ending source of problems. Fluids. This is the beautiful thing about having a company that isn't on the stock market. Yeah. I heard a quote one time that said, only the worst run companies go to the stock market because you open yourself, a company opens itself up to other people's values other than those who own and run the company, right? And this is the same thing. Imagine you have a company that goes slower and slower every quarter, and then you confront the shareholders with the statement that the way to solve it is absolutely no new features for a quarter or two, refactor the code, and learn new methodologies, etc. I doubt the shareholders would allow that, right? Speaking of someone in that world, you gotta rebuild the car while it's running down the road. Luckily, we don't have any shareholders. I mean, you kind of do, but you don't really. We understand the vital importance of this investment in the long run. It's not only a project, but knowledge, skill, and learning, so we do better next time. Well, what would have been good is to do this somewhere around version, 14. But here we are. They cross 1 million. Wait, that's 250, 500, 750K. What's the dots? Oh, those are the version numbers. Oh, okay. That was 1.1 million. I don't know. I was thinking these are numbers. Those are the version dots. Yeah, look at the increase in 16 to 17. Kind of from here on out, we didn't really get a ton of new features other than Spidertron. We got new graphics and new stuff on here out, but we didn't have any a ton of core game changes like recipes and balance stuff. Functionally, actually, no, that's maybe not true. We redid the blue. What did we do after 17 and a half, right? We redid the blueprint library, the train menus, graphic updates, but also the underpinnings of the menus, that sort of things to handle the graphics. We did the tutorial menu, the demo somewhere in there, right? The GUI, right? Yep. It looked pretty reasonable if there was the same amount of people working from start to finish, but it's not. It was just me at the very start. Now there are 9 programmers. It could be explained by the game getting bigger and growing a lot of interconnected mechanics, which is harder to maintain. Or it could also mean that the density of the code improves so much that both of these are not enough to explain why having more programmers doesn't result in faster development. This indicates the problems Uncle Bob describes that are relevant to us. Okay, and the solution is actually to improve the way we develop rather than just scaling the amount of people. Once we have a nice clean foundation, hiring new programmers, getting them up to speed with code will be much faster. Let me explain a few topical examples. The GUI interaction. Oh, yeah. We wrote a lot about the GUI. For example, in 2.16, we iteratively raised the bar of what we find acceptable, both the user and programmer perspective. Common takeaways from the FFF, from the coding, was that they're always underestimating how complex the GUI styles, logic, and layout, etc. can become. This implies that improving the way the GUI is written has large potential gains. Or did. It would have been before you redid it 3 times. Happy with the GUI, how they're structured since the 17 update, right? Code-wise, still feels more bloaty than it should be. The main problem was the amount of places you need to touch to add an interactive element. Here's an example. So, I'm just going to step through these. You need to register listener of that button. Way too much. So there's a header, and then there's a button, and then there's a button with the parameters and register listener, etc., etc. All right. This is way too much boilerplate for one button with a simple action. We have over 500 places where we registered action listeners in the code, so imagine the amount of bloat. Kind of noticed that we're using lambdas to signal callbacks to similar things in the GUI. I don't know what a lambda is. I gotta be honest with you. It tends to be much more pleasant to use. So what if we made the primary way to do the GUI? We decided to completely rewrite the way it works. So instead of adding listeners to the listeners and the filtering from the event catching function, we just specify. Big improvement already, and maintaining new logic requires you only look at one place instead of several. Makes it generally more readable and less prone to errors. Since we don't need to hold the pointer for comparisons, completely remove its definition from the class. Make it anonymous on many places. There is. Lambda from the chat. Lambda is an anonymous function that captures some calling functions in scope. Oh! Nerd alert! We ran the GUI internals again. See? Was a big task, but in the end it really felt to be worth it. And now I can't imagine how Stan doing it the old way. Of course, yeah. You always look back at your old creations and cringe. But this sort of stuff you got to give an iterative break to. You got to give a break to folks that iterate. I mean, that's the thing of constant improvement is that you need to appreciate the journey of learning, right? Something we're all dealing with at work. Figure 2, the manual building. There are several main goals to pursue when you try and make the code cleaner. Removing code duplications is the first biggest priority. It is reasonably to solve when the code isn't structured well. Functions are too long or names are weird. But if you have 5 versions of the same pile of code, slight changes here and there, it is the worst beast. It is just a question of time until bug fixes, changes are only applied to some variants, and it becomes less and less obvious where the differences between the variants and the intended circumstantial. The manual building logic is a monster because of all the things it supports already. Yeah, overriding. Looking at a box. Splitters on belts. Overriding ghosts. Dragging and logic of the links. Upgrading, snapping to grid, snapping to train, right? Upgrade overwrite. Walls and crossing. Undergrounds and pulling up belt. Overriding undergrounds. Declaring upgrades. This is a new one, the automatic underground placement. And then maximum underground length. All this logic needs to be multiplied by 2 when you're lazy and copy and paste, as you have no normal building, ghost building, right? Then you multiply this whole cold abomination, good word, by 2 again. Why? Because it also needs to do all this logic in the latency hiding mode. Sounds bad already, but it is all of it, since this logic was continually being patched and touched by different people. Core of the code was crazy long method with the code looking like the horizon mentioned by Uncle Bob. Well, so I guess what we need to what's up, Shred Guy? As we need to look at here is yeah. I mean, over time, that's kind of what happens to everybody, right? Now, imagine you need to change something about this code, especially when you take into consideration that the code naturally has many corner cases wrong or fixed only in some of the variants of code. This was a great example of how lazy long-term design leads to poorer productivity. Technical debt is what is a great word for it. Technical debt is big time. My company is fighting that all the time, and we got that vocabulary, I think, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, across everybody, so everybody knows what that is now, and it's a beast, and we're digging our way out of it, which is pretty cool. And I'm on the front side of that. It's pretty neat. Let's see. Long story short, this was approached like a hobby project of mine that took weeks to be finished, but in the end, all the duplications were merged. All the code is structured and fully tested. Managing the code requires a small fraction of the time compared to the previous state because the reader is not required to read a huge pile of code to get the big picture. Oh, okay, so that's good. Reminds me of a quote from Lou at Similar Climate of Refactoring. Once we are done with this, it'll be actually a pleasure to add stuff to this code. Isn't that beautiful, right? More efficient, less buggy, more fun to work with, and working on something enjoyable tends to go faster regardless of other aspects. Absolutely. So So I won't. Oh, more. I'm not going to go through this part. I think. Automated testing is pretty key. We're trying to raise the bar. What code covered by test leads us to cover another area of the GUI. Okay. Good. So they got some automated testing done with the GUI. I have to admit, I didn't know what TDD was, test-driven development. I think it's you write requirements, and then you write the test for the requirements, and then you build it. Right? And you build to the test that you want to satisfy. Is that it? Did I get it right? TDD actually is a constant fast switching between extending the tests and making them pass continuously. Huh. Right, so TDD in games is hard. Write failing test, build code that passes a test, refactor code. And then repeat. I get it. Thank you for the follow. Interesting, okay. This allows to instantly test what you write and mainly use specification of what code can actually do, guides throughout the process. Huh. So after the aha moment, realizing what TDD really is, I started being an instant fan. Now putting a lot of effort to try TDD methodology as much as possible, where you intentionally write the failing tests, refactor your code to pass the tests, test it, repeat. It ensures that you don't get repeats of bugs. You write the test for the bug, confirm failure, fix it, and then run the test for every build. So you're constantly going through these automated tests, I guess, right? Now putting a lot of effort behind the TDD methodology as much as possible and force it on other teams as well. It feels slower to write the test even for simple piece of logic, but it's bound to the right. But the test proved me wrong several times already, prevented annoying low-level debugging sessions in the near future. And the way to go fast is to go well. And of course, there's test dependencies. Let me skip over some of this. Well, let's see. For example, let's say we have a test of electrical poles connecting properly on the map, but I can hardly test it when I don't know that searching for entities on the map works properly. Oh, so dependent testing. Yeah, it's a good example. Having dependencies like this is fine as long as the dependencies are also tested, right? So that means you need to automate. I mean, I don't know how you automate all that business. The problem comes when you break something and a lot of tests start to fail suddenly. When you do small changes, a yes/no indication of test is enough, but it isn't always an option, especially when you refactor some internal structure, in which case you expect to break a lot of stuff, and you need to have a way to fix them step by step and compile it again. Huh. Goal's pretty easy. I want to be given the most simple fail case of my change. Right. I've implemented a simple test dependency system. The tests are executed and listed in a way that when you give the debug and check a test, you know that all dependencies are already working correctly. Let's look at this table. Huh, okay. Not only will it make tests more useful, but it forces us to split test suites into smaller, more specialized units, which certainly helps as well. Right. Break it up. Yeah. Imagine a test made an entity and you got that deep with your test yet, so you change entity and it breaks for entity ghost, entity pole. Right. And then test cover when Boskid joined the team as a QA guy. One of his main roles is making sure that any discovered bug is first covered by a test before it gets actually fixed. Oh. Generally improving our code test coverage. This made the releases much more confident and had less regression bugs, which directly transitions into the long-term efficiency. I strongly believe that this clearly indicates to support what Uncle Bob is saying. Working with tests feels slower, but it's actually faster. Test coverage is a good indicator of which parts of the code are executed when the application runs. Right. I never used a tool to measure test coverage before, but since it was one of the topics Uncle Bob talked about, I tried to use this for the first time. Found a tool that only works on Windows but requires least amount of setup. Uh-huh. There you go. You know, the way to go fast is to go well. If you're moved by this, if your emotion when you read this is, I wish my boss had these priorities, consider applying for a job at Whoop. Oh, look at there. Look at there. I don't do this. This is really good. Yeah, Malstrup. Go ahead and dig into Uncle Bob's forums up there. Let's hit this. So essentially, it looks like we're only going to get. Looks like we're only going to get some efficiency and some underpinnings of Factorio. Not a lot of game changes here, but what will happen is over time they should be able to add features more quickly. It's a shame that this was post 1.0. I'm sure they would have liked this methodology when they were digging through version 16 going to 17 with those big changes. But now's the best time. If they can implement this before whatever they're doing next, whether it's whatever they're going to bolt on to the rest of Factorio or Factorio 2, should be good. These unit tests are very, very important, right? More confidence that your code changes are valid. I mean, I've seen Woo programmers before live on air, and someone in the chat said, "Wait, don't you want to test that code change?" And the person said, "No, it'll work." It's like, well, that's one level of confidence. The other one is, oh yeah, as soon as I hit the button, it's gonna automatically do all these tests, and I'll know it works. It's not. I think it's gonna work. My unit test confirms that it works. So. Yeah, so anyway, very good stuff, and it's very good to hear from Kovarex that he is still energized and still pushing forward with Factorio. It's really great. I like to hear from these guys, and I like to hear that they are continually evolving. It shows continuous improvement. It shows energy for the product, and it shows that they also posting these sorts of things shows that they care about keeping us informed and engaged, and letting us know that they are also engaged, even after 4 months of hearing not a whole lot of anything. So it's great. Thank you very much for watching. If you would, hit that subscribe button, like this video. Appreciate your time. We'll see you next time. Uh-oh. Dead mouse.